Hello, and welcome to this Facebook Live where I'm going to be talking about wisdom and intuition and how to sense the difference between that and our sort of normal everyday personal thinking or our habitual thinking that's maybe not quite so useful. So my name is Lindsay Elliott, and I'm a wellbeing and resilience coach, energy healer and meditation teacher. So in the work that I do, I talk a lot to my clients and in videos and blogs about the energy of thought, about thinking, the power of thought, and how we don't have to believe everything that we think. That thought is an energy that's moving through us, that brings a thought with us, brings a thought to us, that gives us our perception or our reality of the outside world about what's going on for us, and it creates our perception, feelings about things. So whilst thought energy is really all one energy and one experience, what I have found and have seen is that there does tend to be different flavors of thinking. So when I'm talking about not believing every thought that passes through your mind, what I'm really talking about is more of that sort of habitual, intellectual, often negative, but not always, chatter that goes on in our minds. So it's the thinking that we've heard a million times before that says, I really need to do this, I should do that, I must do this, why aren't I doing this? All of that kind of should, must, can't, don't, all of that kind of thinking. As I say, that we've maybe heard 1,000 million times before and feels very familiar to us. It feels very much like it's the voice in our head. It's in our voice that's telling us what we can and can't do, what we should and shouldn't do, and is often creating our habitual reactions to situations, to people, to events in our lives. Now that kind of thinking, that flavour of thinking, I've pretty much learnt to identify, to help my clients learn to identify, and to really question whether, do I really need to believe this? Is this absolutely true? And 99.9% of the time, no, it isn't absolute truth. It's just a version of truth. So this type of thinking, that's sort of what I visualize it as, is more sort of coming from our sort of computer brain or our analytical brain, our intellectual brain. It's almost like being in a sort of processing mode. So all of that thinking where you might get, right, I've got to get up, I've got to get the kids to school, I've got to do the lunchbox, I've got to do all that kind of like repetitive thinking. And we can spend the vast majority of our day in this type of thinking, but this type of thinking doesn't really offer us anything fresh or new, because we've heard it lots and lots of times before. It's a bit like putting a record player on and playing exactly the same record. But there is another flavour of thinking that's available to us as human beings, and as I said at the beginning, it is really all one energy, but sometimes it's helpful to break it down so that we can start to discern the difference to what we need to, what's wise to listen to and what's wise to just let pass through us and ignore. So we also have more of a free-flowing style of thinking, so where thought energy is really just passing through us and we're just sort of acting on it. We're not really thinking about our thinking. And we also have those sort of inner, what I like to call as like inner nudges, or our inner wisdom, or our intuition. So this is something that is inbuilt within all of human beings. All of us are built with this ability to connect to our own wisdom, to what's right for us, what's true for us, and to listen to those inner nudges about the best way forward with something. Now, I find often this inner wisdom and these inner nudges don't come when I'm actually thinking about something. So if I've got a perceived problem in my life or something that needs a solution, if I go into my sort of analytical, habitual, personal thinking, I'll be chewing it over and thinking, how can I get through this? What are the solutions? What are the options? And often when we're chewing it over, nothing fresh or new comes. And it's often when it's off of our mind, we've put it on the back burner, or just when quite naturally we're involved in something else, that then our inner wisdom and our intuition can actually talk to us. So I find it's when I'm not actually thinking about the problem that actually the solution arises. And you know, typically people will say, when they're out for a run, when they're having a shower, when they're driving in their car, is when they have this sort of insight-based thinking come to them, this wisdom-based thinking, where something just pops in, you haven't heard it before, and you're like, yeah, of course, that's the solution, that's the way forward, that's what I'm missing, that's what I need to look at. And I find it's really important to be able to discern between these two sort of flavors of thinking, because it allows us the freedom to let go of the stuff that we've heard before, that we know maybe comes from a more fearful place and is just our repetitive, habitual stuff. But then it's also really important to listen to those inner nudges and that wisdom, because there's real gold in those. This is personalized information, if you like, coming from the source of everything, energy that flows through us, that's giving us personalized information about the best way forward. So I want to give you a few examples from my own life of where I have listened to that wisdom and when I haven't listened to that wisdom, and what it feels like when that wisdom comes. So when I was in my early 30s, I'd been in a long-term relationship, and we ended up getting married and subsequently also getting divorced. And he was a beautiful man, but we just weren't right for each other. And before it actually came to us getting married, I had quite a lot of inner nudges or wisdom come to me that we weren't right for each other and that we shouldn't get married. But because I wasn't really as aware then, back in my late 20s, early 30s, about the difference between listening to my wisdom and listening to my personal thinking, and probably because I was scared to acknowledge that that was what I was feeling and that was what my wisdom was telling me, I ignored that inner wisdom. And consequently, sure enough, we ended up getting divorced. So that was, for me, was a very clear example of where I ignored an inner knowing. And whilst the result at the time, going through the process, was incredibly painful, in hindsight, I learned an incredible amount about it. It created a lot of growth for me, a lot of personal growth, and led me down various different paths that I wouldn't be on now had that not have happened. So I don't regret that happening, but it was a very clear example to me where I didn't listen to that inner nudge because I was too scared to. So another example in my life where I did listen to an inner nudge, even though I was scared, was that when I met my now husband, when we first got together, he got offered a job in Australia. And I'm incredibly close to my family. I have a wonderful network of friends. And he said to me, what do you think? Shall we go and live in Australia for a while? Now, my head, my sort of habitual personality type thinking was saying, no, I can't do that. I'm too scared. I can't leave my family. I can't leave my friends. But deep within me, my intuition and my wisdom said to me, my heart said to me, you need to go. You're going to find something spiritual while you're there. And sure enough, I did. I went to Australia. I found my guru, a beautiful spiritual school called Shanti Mission, and also the form of energy healing that I'm trained in. So in that case, I did listen to that inner nudge and that inner wisdom, and it brought me such amazing experiences. I loved living in Australia. Our son was born there, and as I say, I found the next step of my personal growth by following that nudge. If I'd listened to my head, to my thinking, my personal thinking, I wouldn't have gone. And it did cause a lot of upset within my family and for some of my friends that I was leaving. But it felt like the right thing to do for me. It felt like the right thing to do for my relationship with my husband. And it was an incredibly precious and beautiful time. And then more recently, I'll give you an example of an inner nudge or an inner wisdom. So I noticed that since my son has gone back to school, he went through, in the first few weeks, a bit of a period of time of being a bit more shouty, a bit more upset quite a lot. And if I said no to him about something, he would react and blow up. And this isn't his personality at all. And I was a bit confused about this, thinking maybe it's just settling back into school, and had lots of thinking about it. And then an inner nudge came to me that said I had also been acting more short with him. I had also been maybe shouting a bit more than I normally do, because quite innocently, with him going back to school, I'd got back into my work, I'd got back into my business, and I'd come up a bit up into my head about my work. And this had naturally sort of withdrawn some of my energy from the family unit, and withdrawn a bit of my connection and my attention, because I was up in my head thinking about my business more than I had been over the summer holidays when I had a break. And so I wasn't thinking about it consciously, but this thought came to me, this inner wisdom that felt very right, peaceful, that said, you've withdrawn some of your energy from this relationship, and this is what's creating the reaction from him. He's reacting to my behavior, and he's also reacting to my innocently being more up in my head and thinking about other stuff. And so with that, I knew that I just needed to reconnect with him in my heart, be consciously loving in my communications with him. And it's all completely changed. As soon as I was aware of that, and I started to come from that place, from that feeling of consciously letting go of thinking about my work and being present with him, his behavior has completely changed, and so has mine. So really, I could have dismiss that inner wisdom as, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I chose to see the gold in it, and I've seen the results in it, because our children, in fact everybody, people live in the feeling that we're emitting. So our children live in the feeling that we're in. So when I was in a feeling of being a bit rushed and a bit busy and up in my head about my business, that created a disconnect for my son, and consequently his behavior was a bit more challenging. And as soon as I recognized that and altered my path, my course, came back into more connection with myself and with my wisdom, and slowed down, that created much more harmony within our relationship, as it usually is. So I hope those are some useful examples of what can happen when you do listen to your wisdom, and what can happen when you don't. And of course, you know, as I said with my example with getting divorced, it's totally fine that I didn't listen to my wisdom. My life would have had a different path had I listened to that wisdom, and it's all okay. But it's also really important to know that it's okay to listen to that wisdom, that you can trust those inner nudges, that you can trust your own intuition, and that you have as much capacity as the next person for wisdom-based and insightful thinking. And really, partially it's about slightly slowing down so that you can recognize which mode of thinking that you're in. If you're a bit caught up in your head, if your awareness says to you, oh, you're just busy, you're up in your mind, you can just take that information and adjust accordingly, and go into the mode of not having to believe everything that's running through your mind. And then as we slow down, as we take our mind off of things, when that inner nudge comes, we can know that we can trust that. So the feeling that I get, and this is personal to me, and you'll have your own experience of listening to your own wisdom, is that when I have an insightful based thought, or a wisdom based thought, or something from my intuition, it doesn't have a should or a can't or a don't attached to it. It has a much more kind of expansive, open, peaceful and loving feeling that comes with it. So what you're really looking for is the feeling within you. So when you're believing your personal thinking, your habitual thinking, we tend to feel rushed, stressed, overwhelmed, all of those more slightly kind of negative emotions, pressure. But when we're feeling our wisdom, it tends to feel more peaceful in our body. We tend to feel more at ease, more calm, and just a real sense of of course. So I hope this has been useful. And I would encourage you just to, if you do have a problem in your life that you're intellectually chewing over, maybe just put it on the back burner and just trust that your wisdom is absolutely reliable and will give you maybe not the complete solution, but the next step. And maybe also you could reflect on, where have I recently heard some wisdom that I've innocently chosen to ignore? So whether it is, I absolutely do need to leave my job, or I do need to work on my relationship, or I do need to take that new job even though I feel really fearful about it, whatever it may be. So just spending a few moments just to reflect on your own experiences with your wisdom, and taking some time to notice when it's talking to you, because there really is such power and such gold within our lives when we can pay attention to that quieter voice within. So I'll leave you with a metaphor that I have talked about before, that our more sort of habitual, personal, revved up thinking can feel like a brass band is playing, and our wisdom will feel like a flute playing in the background. So this flute is constantly playing, but when we've turned our attention towards the brass band, it's pretty loud, it's pretty noisy, and it's pretty addictive, and also pretty hard to draw your attention away from. And it's really hard to hear the flute that's quietly playing. But the more that we can see when we're focused on the brass band and not listening to the flute, the more peace we can have in our lives, the more calm, the more insight-based solutions can come to us. So I hope that's a useful visual as well for you to take away. So thank you for watching this video. If you have any questions you'd like to ask me, any topics you'd like me to cover in these Facebook Live videos, which I'll be doing every week, please do either private message me or post on my page, because I would love to know what you'd love to hear about. And if you have any questions you'd like me to answer, that would be fabulous. Okay, so thank you for listening and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye.